Hi, everyone. This is Melanie Yazzie. Elena's here with me. You want to say hi, Elena?
Hello, it's Elena Ortiz from Ogapoge. Back again.
I know. You haven't heard our voices since maybe like the end of February. It's been like 4 months. It's been like 4 months since we recorded a podcast episode. Elena reminded me, because I had forgotten, that the last episode we did was about Dune 2. It was called Riding the Worm. uh, and we had promised to be back doing regular Red Power Hour episodes, and then we disappeared for 4 months. And many apologies for that, but also there are some good reasons for those things. My understanding is that a couple of folks actually emailed to be like, "Are you guys okay? Is you okay? Like, where did you go?"
So the short answer to that question is kind of. But you know, life's been interesting, and yeah, we'll talk about it.
When I was just like, you know what? Sure, I'll record a podcast episode this week. I got really nervous because we've done this for so many years, but I was like, oh my god, I haven't done this in such a long time. Like, what if I shit the bed, or whatever? Like, oh my god, what am I going to say? I don't because I haven't been in like podcast land for the last handful of months. I'm writing. Like intensively working on my book because tenure is approaching quickly. There's a lot going on in the world of. I haven't really been doing organizing, but just like the political climate in the United States is a horrific dumpster fire. And so dealing with a lot of fallout from right wing backlash has taken up a lot of my time also. And just dealing with health issues. I think Elena and I both dealing with health issues. I got COVID in February and then I got long COVID. And so it's just been it's been a combination of a lot of things, some good, some not so good. And honestly, like recording a podcast was not on my list of priorities for the last handful of months. I truly apologize to our listeners if we have any like RPH super fans out there. Maybe I'm just talking into the ether and we don't actually have RPH super fans and no one has missed us, which is also totally fine.
Oh, I think they missed us. It has. It's been like, I don't know. I feel like I was out in the ether for a while, and I did some traveling in the new year, and I've also been dealing with just very bad asthma is the bottom line of my health issues. And every time I traveled, I would come home and like not be able to get out of bed for a week, and that was crazy. So finally I was able to. I have pretty good insurance through my work, and I was able to get on a medication. The first shot, I think, was in May, and it's a super expensive medication for asthma, but I feel a lot better, and it's almost like, wow, that really impacted my health for like the last years, and I never noticed. I just thought being tired was a product of aging, and now I have a lot more energy and I feel a lot better. But it was a long road, um, and I'm thankful for decent health insurance. And it also just made me think of all of the people out there that are struggling, and the anger that I feel about that, and about how this failing colonial project has treated all of us, and the lack of universal health care, and the it just, if anything, I fell back into this, well, this is why you're a communist. This is why you need to like go back and start rereading stuff because now you really like with every step forward. I look around and I've also, I've also done some stuff, not organizing, but social, not social events, but the Santa Fe Literary Festival. And I'm sitting there listening to two native people talking, and the whole rest of the room, this is Santa Fe. Um, the whole rest of the room is just pissing me off. Like, I just want to get up and yell at all of them because they have no clue. And we've got two native people discussing how hard it is because people keep asking them to talk about their traumas. And I'm they're causing me trauma as I'm sitting there listening to them because like I don't care about that. I just want, I'm there to be supportive and to be like, yay, Native writers are able to write about things now that are not about on the great wide plain a horse came running up, and that like all of that crap that everyone always expected of Native writers. And now we're getting into this period where Native writers can write about anything and it doesn't have to be Native specific. And it's making me happy, but at the same time, in a bougie ass settler colonial community of like this is like settler colonialism on steroids. These people are here not only as settlers, but they're here to consume Native culture, and they don't care how or what cost, but they want to consume Native culture. And so it makes me, I'm sorry, I'm on a tirade here. It makes me really uncomfortable to be in this position with like to be in the audience with these people because I want to be in relation with the Native writers and to be supportive and to talk to them about their work. And all we're getting is this settler colonial attitude of I paid God knows however much they paid to get a ticket to this, so I own you for the next 10 minutes and I can ask you whatever I want. And it's all about trauma and it's making me insane. So I'm going to end it here by saying, suffice to say that even though we may have been off for 4 months, we certainly haven't probably gotten any more mellow. Like, if anything, I've gotten more pissed off. And just from living like regular everyday life, the political situation is shit. The social situation is shit. Everything is going to shit. And if you think it's otherwise, I think you're wrong. We're subjecting ourselves, to all of this media. Melanie and I were just talking about this. Like, I can't watch the news. I can't even have it on. I can't be in the same room. I can't look at it. I can't see more pictures of dead children. And I can't feel good about what's going on. And that's hard because we have talked about many times about how hope is revolutionary. And I still believe hope is revolutionary. And I still believe that, a white buffalo calf was born in captivity at Yellowstone. And, my first reaction to seeing that, hearing that was, we need to go liberate her. And she needs to be on free and open land. And that's kind of the way I feel about my own life right now. Like, there's this little being, this little part in the world, this little hope, and she's being commodified for, she was on the news. Like, let's stop doing that.
Like more settler kind of tourism
Yeah.
to go ogle this miracle. Elena and I were having a hard time trying to figure out what to talk about today. I mean, there's not a shortage of news roundup topics. This could have been a news roundup episode. I still want to do a breakdown of the Planet of the Apes movies. Elena has not seen the most recent one, but I wrote back when Facebook was a thing and I was on social media. This was like 2014 when the first Planet of the Apes came out. I wrote this whole analysis of Planet of the Apes and people were like, this is amazing. And I was like, oh, I could actually just do this. And so then we created a podcast. I get to do that. But anyway, you need to go see the last Planet of the Apes, Elena, so that we can record an episode. I think our comrade Justine, who's been on the podcast quite a bit, also wants to join for that. So anyway, that's something that I would like to do, but we were not prepared to do that today. And so we were just kind of like scratching our heads about what are we going to talk about today? And I feel like what you just opened up with, Elena, I think this is just going to be another one of those Native women freestyle RPH episodes, especially since we've been gone for so long. And the podcast has just not been quite as much of a focus for either of us for a lot of good reasons. I think ranting, fuck, man. Native women don't get the chance to just rant. And it's not even ranting, to just be unapologetic and really honest about the experience of being Native women in this cruel, disgusting settler world. I haven't spoken publicly about something that happened to me 6 months ago, 7 months ago now, but like many people, and I'm not unique by any means, but there were some elements to this that I think were unique. I was targeted, I think, specifically because I'm a Native woman, definitely because I'm a communist. But I got doxxed at the very end of December, I was doxxed by a right-wing group, a Minnesota-based right-wing group, for some comments I made at a Red Nation teach-in that was held in Minneapolis on December 3rd. And it wasn't just so I've been doxxed before. I've talked about this a little bit on RPH. I was doxxed in the summer of 2020 during the George Floyd uprising by a right-wing white supremacist militia. In New Mexico, they tried to bring a lynch mob to my house. They doxed my address and everything. The day that Red Nation actually had one of the most powerful and beautiful and largest protests in the history of the organization, that same day was the day they tried to bring people to my house, armed thugs, essentially. And part of the reason I left Albuquerque was because, Albuquerque's almost 1 million people in the metro area, but it's like a small town. And those fascist clowns were still stalking the Red Nation. And the reason why they tried to dox me, or the reason why they did dox me and then tried to harm me and other Red Nation people, was because we were just being really honest in the press about who they were. We're like, you're neo-Nazis, you're fascists, you're racist, and you're coming after Native and Black folks. And you're working with the police to do this. They didn't like the fact that we were being honest, and me in particular. And so that's why they did that. And so where's the lie? Where's the lie? There was no lie about what I was saying. And so after that happened, I didn't entirely feel safe anymore in Albuquerque. Because like I said, Albuquerque is kind of a small town. So, I was like, whatever, my life is changing, move into Minnesota. I'll leave that behind me, only to find out that there's a very well-organized right-wing surveillance here in Minnesota, and they had already been tracking me. I found out there was a very large KeyWiki entry about me. This was after my comrades almost died when they were shot at the Oñate statue, the protest against the reinstallment of the Oñate statue that happened on September 29th of last year. So about 10 months ago. And because then we all had to go online and figure out how to scrub our information and our data from online so that none of us would get doxxed after that particular. And that was a right-wing, MAGA supporter, a New Mexican guy who intended to commit a mass shooting that day, but he failed and was stopped because of the heroic efforts of many indigenous people on the ground that day, including Red Nation people, as well as people from Indian Collective, actually. And so anyway, when I went and I met with this person to scrub my data from the internet, this was maybe in October or November of last fall, I found out that the only two protests I had spoken at up until that point in Minnesota, because I've been kind of incognito, like my life has changed a lot. And so I'm in a new place, and I wasn't out here just trying to like go hard on the political scene here in the Twin Cities immediately. Like there were a lot of things in my personal life I needed to work on and get into order. The only two protests I spoke at, one was an ICWA protest in December of 2022 on campus. And then there was just one more. I don't even remember which one it was. They were both on my Key Wiki. They were both entries in my Key Wiki. And I was like, damn, like I'm being tracked again, and I'm being hunted again since I got here. And so fast forward to December 21st is when the doxing happened. But I don't remember or know which right-wing organization in Minnesota they edited a video clip of me and some of the things that I said at this Red Nation teach-in on December 3rd. It was about Palestine. And there's a very, the doxing culture on the right is very well coordinated and well organized and well funded. And so there's an entire ecosystem of right-wing news and like social media outlets and then influencers who, once something like that hits on social media, it just spreads like wildfire. And I mean, this was no small thing because The Hill did like a 20-minute segment on it. I was a news story on Fox, like Breitbart News did a story on me. I got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of mostly just like really super racist, super sexist emails. Got a lot of death threats, got a lot of rape threats in my university email. People tried to get me fired from my job. And like I said, this has happened to a lot of people. But the thing that people were most pissed off about, and some of these emails are from average people, I think, who just watch right-wing news like Fox or whatever. And then some of it was manufactured. Like people will create obviously like avatars and fake accounts and then just like spam your email with hate mail to heighten the sense of outrage. It's like the economy of outrage that really it's like clickbait. So I was basically clickbait for a relatively brief, like it was about a 2-week news cycle. So it was longer than most news cycles. People are like, oh, it'll die down in 48 hours. It did not die down in 48 hours. I still don't know like how many emails the administration got about me to try to get me fired from my job. But yeah, this happened. And the thing that people were most pissed off about that I said was I was talking about dismantling settler colonialism in the United States. And I told people like that the energy around decolonization right now, that Palestine is the tip of the spear right now around the global struggle for decolonization, that we should, quote unquote, lean in. I'm quoting myself. This is embarrassing. We should lean in to that mobilization and the momentum behind that. Because that's what we've always been about as the Red Nation and Indigenous people. We're interested. We're invested in movements for decolonization because that's how we're going to have a future. That's how liberation happens. And I said that, settlers are really scared right now. It was obvious. We were talking in the podcast and much of the coverage we've done about Palestine, whether it's Israel or the United States, their whole ass is out. Like they're really just like, they're firing on all cylinders to justify this settler colonial genocide of Palestinians. And I said, at that time, that was December of 2023, like millions and millions of people around the world were rising up, and they still are, for Palestine. And I myself was taken aback by how much popular support there was, not just for Palestine, but for decolonization. I didn't realize that the discourse around decolonization and the organizing had made such an impact on people. And I felt like it was unlikely. People who were unlikely, or I would consider were unlikely allies in the struggle for decolonization, understood it so perfectly because what was going on in Palestine. And so I said in my comments that this like widespread support for decolonization for Palestine was remarkable. And I saw it as something incredibly positive as somebody who's advocated for decolonization, like ever since I became an organizer and an intellectual and understood history as an Indigenous person. And so I said we should lean in to like that fear, that settler fear, meaning like these settlers are scared because they can see that our efforts towards mobilizing for decolonization are extremely effective. They have been mainstreamed in a way that they were not when we started the Red Nation a decade ago, right? It means that like we've made some serious gains and they're really scared. They're scared because that intense structure of power that they maintain through the settler colonial project is being like challenged in a way that I had not ever seen before, really. And I had not ever seen before. And I was like, this is fascinating. Like, this is, and people clapped. I remember when I made that comment, there was clapping in the audience. And anyway, it was those comments, especially the comment I made about how we should lean into like settler fear that got me doxxed. Because out of context, right, it sounds like, I don't know, I'm calling for violence. This is what I got accused of a lot, that I was calling for violence. And so anyway, that's what happened. People doxed all of my campus information because thankfully I had scrubbed all my information off the internet. No one came to my house. So that was really nice. But I had to change all my classes to online. I had to go through this intensive, I had to file like a Title IX complaint. And there was because of all the racist and sexist emails I was getting. And this took up the entire month of January and most of the first part of February. And then immediately after that, I got COVID. And then I just had COVID and long COVID for like 2 months after that. And so I had to teach everything online. I was like really, because I was genuinely worried that someone was going to, because my classes are online, are public, because I teach at a public institution. I had to take all of my information off of my faculty bio because people were using that to like hunt for me on the internet and scrub up information. And so, I haven't gone to my office on campus in 7 months. I never went to campus once to teach the entire semester because I was worried somebody was going to come and try to commit a mass shooting in my classrooms. So I was worried for my own safety and the safety of my students. And anyway, I'm like, this is very long-winded, I know, but this is literally the first time I've talked about this in public at all. But the reason why I was targeted wasn't necessarily because there's a lot of faculty who get doxxed for these kinds of things that they say outside of the university and also inside of the university or whatever under the auspices of their job. And so I understand that I am not unique, right? That doxing machine, that right-wing doxing machine moved on to another target after me. And I'm sure they have targeted multiple people since then. And so it's not just me. So I'm not saying that I'm some sort of exceptional case. However, the ire that I received for being a Native person and for being a Native woman who had the quote unquote audacity to say these things and to say them unapologetically on public record in a video that we never took down. Even after I got doxxed, the Red Nation never took my video down, the original video. And it's still up there if you want to go look at it, and nor did I say the most radical things that night. There were 6 other people on that panel. And I felt like I was very much like myself. I felt like I was very much myself that night. I regret, I was really tired that evening, and I feel like I could have been more articulate than I was, but I certainly don't regret what I meant. And the settler people who came at me, who issued death threats and tried to get me fired and made me feel too afraid to speak up anymore, they knew what I meant. And you know what? They weren't wrong. They weren't wrong. I do think, and I think like the presidential debate that just happened, and just the wholesale endorsement of fucking settler colonialism and genocide by the United States, the genocide of Palestinians and the settler colonial context of Israel should prove without a shadow of a doubt that settler colonialism needs to be dismantled and destroyed everywhere in the world, and that this is not an unreasonable thing for a Native person, and particularly a Native woman, who under settler colonialism, Native women are some of the most hyper-racialized and subjected to some of the most intense, degrading violence, exploitation, and degradation of any racialized population subject to US imperialism and settler colonialism. Like, how dare you try to silence that person? And it's taken me months to be able to say this in public, because I ain't gonna lie, like it was effective for a while. I was scared. Like, and still today, I just have to look behind my back. I have to look over my shoulder when I go out in public here. And here I'm this podcast is going to be published. And, I know that a lot of our supporters listen to this, but I'm sure a lot of our enemies listen to this too. And it's a difficult thing to navigate. Even when you have as much experience and as much like expertise and knowledge as somebody like I do. And I'm a strong fucking woman too, and that it really tested all of those things for me. And so I've been spending a lot of time over the last 6 or 7 months trying to figure out how the best things that I can do to protect myself, and that Native women and Native people in this moment who have the most powerful moral claim to dismantle US settler colonialism, that how do we also protect Indigenous people who are standing up and going hard for Palestine, but also for ourselves, right? For ourselves and for our relatives and for the land and for our women. It's Pride Month for our LGBTQ2 relatives. We must continue the work, but the stakes are very different. It's much more dangerous. And I don't want to see Indigenous people, whether they're Palestinian Indigenous people or Indigenous people from here, I don't want Indigenous people to be cannon fodder. I don't want to see, our lives ended and our children like blown up. That's fucking, it is insane to me that Indigenous people are paying the highest price right now for, I guess, in some sort of like perverse way, making gains in the overall like global movement for liberation. It's been really hard. It's disgusting. And me getting doxxed doesn't compare to 40,000 Palestinians now, which is an undercount, having just been murdered by the Israeli genocide machine. But nevertheless, like, the people who are getting targeted the most at universities, oh my God, this is a whole other thing. I'm sorry, I could keep talking. Working at the university right now is just like, oh, it's bad. The American university is bad. There's so much censorship and repression happening. I haven't even started talking about the encampments, because we weren't recording when the encampments were happening. But it's like often Native women and Black women, or just Native faculty and faculty of color who are already, pretty vulnerable when it comes to like the hierarchy within the institution, who are just getting like hammered constantly, for simply being who they are, first of all, but also being unwilling to shut up about the injustice and the violence. And so that is a large part of the reason why I just took a hiatus from the podcast. I was scared. I needed to really take care of myself and figure out how to take care of myself as a Native woman. That was more important to me than honestly sitting here and providing analysis about current events. I don't know. I think it's a pretty profound political act to do that, and to try to figure out the strategies for moving forward where we're able to protect ourselves and to figure out how to keep doing the work while mitigating the risk. And there's been a lot of talk because of the encampments. I've been reading a lot of like zines and stuff that it's like, we should be taking risks and people know what the risk is. And I'm like, that's kind of true. But I also just saw a lot of young people because of the encampment movement that happened a month and a half ago. They also were cannon fodder. Like, a lot of their lives are ruined because of that, because of the repression and the crackdown. And I'm not blaming anyone. I mean, you can't really blame people that like there's a genocide and like authoritarianism in the United States that are basically coalescing at the same time and consolidating into a new form of fascist power, which is basically what's happening in the US. Um, but I want us to make an impact. So I'm like wagging my finger now, doing the Native woman thing. I want us to continue to have a powerful impact, even though the conditions are much more difficult now, doing the kind of things that we do as the Red Nation and being the kind of people that we are. But I want us to be as safe as possible. And I don't know what that means, but that's kind of where I'm at the moment. And so,
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at late stage capitalism, and we're looking at end stage capitalism, and we're looking at the crumbling of the empire. And if you don't see that, and if you don't understand that, then you're not paying attention. We go back to, I remember talking about, 6 months ago, I remember talking about all of the people rising up for Palestine and how that was giving us hope that finally maybe this would become such a topic, that so big of a topic that it couldn't be ignored, and that people would have to engage and people would have to understand everything that we've been saying for years and years about settler colonialism in Palestine and the support for Israel by this country. And I felt like something was going to happen, and that it was going to be successful. In 6 months later, what's happened is an absolute refusal to stop sending weapons of mass destruction to fucking Netanyahu, and a completely oblivious attitude towards the genocide of an entire people. And 40,000 underestimated, like you said, but half of them were children, our children. And there's so much outrage about that. And yet we know, because it happened to our ancestors, that how do you destroy a people? Well, you go for their children. And in this country, they did it by just taking them away and putting them into boarding schools and abusing them until they died. And in Palestine, they're just murdering them. They're just murdering them.
in front of the whole world.
Yeah, in front of the whole world. And I think finally the whole world is looking at it. They're not doing anything, but they're looking at it. And there was something that happened, and I don't know if I was hallucinating. I don't think I was hallucinating. But, I have refused. I was telling Melanie this. I refuse to watch the news or watch TV or anything like that anymore. I just can't. But after the debates, I was coming in from outside, and they had Biden's, I guess, his post-debate rally or whatever it was. And I swear, somebody tell me if I am insane, if I totally misheard, if I'm having auditory hallucinations, but I heard him say, we need to put the Apaches back on the reservation.
Wait, what?
I swear I heard him say that.
I haven't heard anyone tweet or report about that.
So maybe I swear I heard him say that.
Was he referring to Palestinians?
No, he was trying to rally the troops after, from what I understand, he was completely incoherent during the debate, and I think he was referring to Trump's people. It was one snippet of a sentence, and then I walked away. I was like, nope, can't deal with this. But no, I know I wasn't hallucinating because my kiddo was sitting there, and I said, "Did you hear that?" And they said, "Uh huh."
Holy shit.
Look, folks, I shouldn't say this, but my brother always uses lines from movies. There was a famous movie about John Wayne, and he's working for the northern military, trying to get the Apaches back in the reservation. And they were lying like hell to him. And they're all sitting on a bluff. And John Wayne was sitting with two Apaches. And one of them looked at John Wayne and said, "These guys are nothing but lying, dog-faced pony soldiers." Except he's just a liar.
That took me back to the Obama administration and when they went after Osama bin Laden, and the whole operation was called Operation Geronimo, and or bin Laden was referred to as Geronimo, and for some reason, white settler presidents love to talk about the Apaches and love to talk about Geronimo. And here we are back again, 12 years down the line or however many, and we're still talking about putting the Apaches back on the reservations or killing the Apaches. And it just made me feel like we haven't gotten anywhere. I mean, we haven't really achieved anything except that we're all bearing witness to the genocide of Palestinians, and I don't know, I want to keep hope. I want to keep faith. I want to believe that there's a better world coming. It's hard these days. I find myself surrounded by like how can you be sitting here talking about how wonderful your life is when children are dying? How can you sit here and talk about, your next vacation when, in 50 years, there may not be a planet left because of what we're doing, how we're destroying Mother Earth. And I just don't understand. I feel like, in a way, the worse it gets, the more people are just in denial. There's a serious sense of denial about what's going on in the world. And the fact that we have two incoherent old men who want to take over the helm of this ship that's about to crash into a giant iceberg just makes me wonder, how do we get off this ship?
I mean, maybe I can say this as, of course, not all Native people agree, but I can say emphatically that there are many Native people who are not on that fucking ship. That ship is illegally traversing stolen water that was never, you're trespassing. That ship is trespassing on Indigenous land. I want your ship to be fucking gone. This fascist clown show and this just vile fortification that the ruling class is engaged in this moment. They can only keep their power through an intense monopoly on violence. And that violence is genocide, right? That violence is repression, it's censorship, it's murder, right? It's killing a generation of indigenous Palestinian children. Like, the only reason why that ship is still floating is because of the billions, was it like $6.5 billion that the US has given to Israel in military aid since October? But $6.5 billion could like save the fucking planet. I wouldn't even know what to do with that amount of money, you know? And that's just been like, what, 9 months? And it's like, all that is on offer. This is why, like, who gives a shit about these debates? I don't even give a shit about this presidential election. Like, what is the Democratic Party? Please. It's a fucking warmongering, genocidal piece of shit is what the Democratic Party is. And the Republican Party under Trump is just, there's just a bunch of fascists. Like, they just want, like, all of the, what is that doctrine about all the power getting absorbed into the executive branch of the government? And so the president basically becomes a dictator. I forgot, just think that Dick Cheney started this like 20 years ago when he was the Veep. And so anyway, they just want authoritarianism. So the only two things that are on offer are like authoritarianism and just like genocide. And it's like, fuck both of you. Like, these are not options. That's the ship. The ship is genocide and authoritarianism. Period. That's the United States in a nutshell. And what Palestinians have shown us is that settler colonialism is certainly capitalism, but settler colonialism more than anything right now, and US imperialism, are the major contradictions that are coming to a head in the world. And they're contradictions that need to be fucking resolved, right? We can't suspend, speaking from a Marxist perspective, we can't suspend those contradictions anymore. And Palestine will not allow us to ever look away again from the contradiction of settler colonialism. Like, we must engage it until we defeat it. That's where we're at right now. We're in it. Like, what is this thing we say sometimes? The cake can't be unbaked. And this cake cannot be unbaked. Like, either we resolve the contradiction or we die. We actually say this in the Red Deal. It's decolonization or extinction. And we weren't even talking about Palestine. We're talking about climate change at that time. And there should be no doubt in anyone's mind that settler colonialism is a fucking vile project that needs to be eradicated from the face of the earth, because it only speaks the language of violence. It only operates through pure violence. And it is, I don't even know what the right adjective is to describe how revolting settler colonialism is. And if you don't feel that, like, deep down in your heart and your spirit, I don't know what I can do for you. And isn't that what Palestine has taught us? I actually don't hear a lot of people who do Palestine solidarity work in the US talk about settler colonialism, actually. Even right now, 9 months into this harrowing struggle for decolonization. And so, yeah, that's what I got doxxed. I got doxxed for saying the thing I just said. Settler colonialism needs to be eradicated from the face of the earth.
So I guess that makes us the iceberg.
Okay.
You're on stolen land. You must not. You shall not pass.
You shall not pass. Oh my gosh. I love this metaphor.
Yeah.
You're the iceberg. And you know
we
what?
are the iceberg. I mean, when you were talking about it, that's what I was thinking. I said, we are the iceberg.
We are the iceberg. And you know what? The iceberg always wins. So the Titanic shows us that. Like those people, those billionaires who blew up in that submarine that was going down last year too, shows you that. Anyway, that was a funny moment. Comrade submarine. Really taken
Comrade
out.
Submarine. Comrade Submarine. Can you take Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Donald Trump, Joe Biden down into that submarine? Yeah.
To that tin can or whatever the fuck that thing was.
We got a new passenger list for you.
They all go up into space in tin cans too. I'm surprised that shit hasn't imploded or exploded when those billionaires have so much money. They're just like going to the depths of the ocean or the heights of space in tin cans. Like, again, cool story. That's the only solution. That's the only alternative, is like space exploration and deep sea exploration, authoritarianism and genocide. Yeah, like no one can afford a house. People can't afford healthcare. No one can afford gas. Uh, it's insane. The cost of everything is insane. I don't even know how people are like managing to get by right now. And I make a middle class salary. But something I wanted to say that I did not articulate well when I was talking about being doxxed earlier, right? It's not a coincidence that Osama bin Laden was called Geronimo. His code name, military code name, was Geronimo. And it is interesting, but also not surprising, that Joe Biden said we need to put the Apaches back on the reservation, because any person, especially any like indigenous person, whether Palestinian or me or Geronimo himself, who can be deemed as an insurgent, as like an enemy, right? As an enemy of empire, as an enemy of settler colonialism, that person is cast as an insurgent, right? Another word for insurgent is terrorist in the common parlance of our times. I was called a terrorist. Actually, it was the other thing that a lot of people called me in the emails they sent to me. They called me a terrorist. And so that discourse of terrorism actually comes from this like original fiction of the United States, right? The United States as an expanding imperial and colonial force that was encountering really robust resistance and effective resistance from Native people, whether they were like Oceti people or Apache people or my people or your people. And so this whole discourse of terrorism and insurgency had to be developed to criminalize indigenous resistance, anti-colonial resistance, and land and water defense, which is also happening right now. You're just seeing a lot of people being cast within the image of terrorism, to silence, to fire, to destroy their lives, to kill them, to incarcerate them. So this is happening to a lot of people right now. But I've seen the discourse of terrorism come back with a renewed fervor that I haven't seen for 20 years, since the quote unquote war on terror began after 9/11. So that was 23 years ago. And ever since October 7th, like I've seen the application of the discourse of terrorism expand substantially to justify heightened surveillance, heightened repression, heightened crackdown on all people who can be cast in, guess what, in the image of the original insurgents. And who are those? It's indigenous people. Anyone who is being cast, the original Red Scare, like we are the original Red Scare to the United States. And so that whole like settler hysteria that happened after I made the comment, as an indigenous person who has a relatively high profile for engaging in like quote unquote radical politics or like left politics or revolutionary stuff. I say militant things, you know, I'm sure that these are all the things people might use to describe me. Here I am. I'm just like a modern day Geronimo, you know, and I don't know, proud of it. If that is the truth.
And I think the women are the modern day Geronimos, because we're fighting for a better world. And, in my experience with the Red Nation and just from being on this earth for almost 60 years, is that it's the women who are always trying to get things done. And so we're the ones out there in the public eye. We're the ones with the targets on our back. We're the new Geronimos.
I mean, most of our movements, at least in North America, have been led by women. The indigenous movements have been led by Native women. Yeah, Native women absolutely are the new Geronimos. Cast as terrorists and insurgents and enemies of the state by the settler ruling class. But for us, we just follow in a tradition of, oh my God, just providing an alternative to like the death machine of US imperialism and settler colonialism, but also just wanting a future of peace and equality and balance and just being in right relation. with the world and with the earth. That's all I want. That's why I do what I do. Because the world is so profoundly out of balance. Like settler colonialism is the upside down world. Like if I'm trying to remember what's the popular Netflix show,
Oh, Stranger Things.
Stranger Things, right? Is that that's the upside down world? Is that what it's called? We're in the upside down world. We're in like the never ending nightmare hell right now. And like that's what settler colonialism and capitalism create for us. And indigenous people have long memories, and we know what the world looks like when it's correct, when we're on the right side up. And we carry that memory, and like that's what keeps us going because we know what the world is supposed to look like and what the world should look like. And like for us, that is the future. As Nick said, our history is our future. We know what the future looks like because we carry that because we know what that looks like. And we existed before this hell came down on this hellscape came down onto our lands. And we can foresee a future that is free, where these lands are free from that. And so that's all Geronimo was doing. He was just like, get the fuck off my land. That's all he was doing, and protecting his people.
Yep. And that's why I think it's so hard to stomach being around people who don't have a clue, because the bottom line is that imperialism, settler colonialism, and capitalism have to end. And they have to end if we're all going to survive. So you can't separate them from what is going on right now. And to try to say, you're against the Palestinian genocide without recognizing that it's the same thing that happened on these lands, on Turtle Island, is only a portion of the story. And the story that has been told up until now has been the settler colonial story, but the people's story is coming, and it's whoever is left is going to tell it. And I can goddamn promise you it's not going to be the settlers, because they have no idea how to live on this land. They have no idea how to live on this earth. They have no idea how to be caretakers. They, created a society of people who worked to make other people rich. And now those rich people are so rich beyond belief. Like, I don't even know how these people can like wake up in the morning and face themselves in the mirror when they're brushing their teeth. Like, why do you need $40 billion? Like, what are you going to do with it? It's all ephemeral. It doesn't really exist. But meanwhile, the planet is dying, and you will never have grandchildren walk this earth. So what are your $40 billion going to go to? I mean, there's just such an insanity in this society right now. And it's like that old sci-fi movie, I think it's called They Live, where you put on the sunglasses and you see the lizards, and you take off the sunglasses and they all look like humans. Like, I think there's a group of us who haven't had those glasses for a long time, and all we're seeing is these lizard people. No offense to lizards, because we love lizards. And then we look at them like, don't you get it? This is not your land. These are not your goods. These are not your services. Like, you depend on all of the rest of us for your livelihood.
Entirely.
What happens when we say no? What happens when we are the iceberg?
Exactly. What happens when we refuse any further exploitation? Something we have not really talked a lot about. I've been wanting to do an episode on this, but obviously life got in the way. But the intense uptick in labor organizing that has been going on in the US over the last 2 years. I feel like it's gotten kind of buried because of the genocide in Palestine, and rightfully so. But there's like the working class in the US, especially like racialized working class, are refusing, to be exploited, because the existence, not just of the ruling class, but of like the settler ontology, like the existence of the settler as a thing and as a person that can reside on stolen land, depends entirely upon the exploitation of an underclass, a racialized underclass. And indigenous people, certainly, as the original caretakers and stewards of this land, are part of that underclass. And we're an important arm or a sector of that underclass, because we were here first. We were here before any of this bullshit started to transpire in this hemisphere. And so, as you said, I do believe that we will be here. We will always be here. Like, no amount of doxing or incarceration can stop that pure and simple fact that indigenous people will always be here, and that we carry the certainty of a future, because we know, because that's where we are, that's where we came from, and that's who we continue to be. And of course that looks like terrorism. Of course that scares the shit out of settlers, because you're right. When the entire support network, the exploited class that makes your very existence possible, disappears, what is it that Nick says sometimes? Like, equality to these people looks like oppression. When we have real equality, like, you would be incapable of existing. Your very being would have to change. And you know what? I want that to happen. Because it needs to happen. It needs to happen for liberation to be even remotely possible.
Before the Civil War, when there were enslaved peoples on plantations who rose up and fought back over their overseers and their masters, that's what this looks like, except it's on a larger scale. And those white people couldn't understand what was happening. And to them, it was just an insult to their lifestyle, to their belief in their own autonomy, to their belief that their wealth protected them from the insurgents. And they found out really fast it doesn't. And I feel like this is, on a global scale, that comfort level of settlers all over the world is beginning to be threatened. And fascism is the only response that they have.
It's the only one they can have. They've completely lost any moral or political justification or high ground. And so that's why they're like, okay, well, we're just gonna murder all of you. We'll murder the whole global South. We'll just murder all of you, and that's the way, And we'll destroy the entire Earth. They're like, that's how we keep Teslas, and that's how we keep our lifestyles, because that's what it's about, Elena. That word lifestyle. It's why I got so I was like, "Arr," when you said that, because it is. It's about lifestyle and comfort.
And that, I think this is what end stage capitalism looks like. That, on a microcosm, it's the guy who walks into Starbucks and can't get his coffee because there's not enough staff, because the staff is striking, because they want to be paid and treated well. And that is so abhorrent and shocking to the guy. He doesn't understand why. Why can't you hire people? Why can't you retain employees? because we are not your slaves, not anymore. I mean, it really, it's like it's happening on a microcosm. It's happening globally, and it's end stage capitalism. It is the end of imperialism. It is that ship carrying all of those settlers, and they're dancing and they're eating and they're spending their trillions of dollars on the in-ship casino, and that iceberg is just coming closer and closer and closer. Yeah, I hear drowning is a good way to go.
That's the title of this episode. Drowning is a good way to go.
Yeah.
I'm writing it down.
Because I think it was Arundhati Roy who said, "We are the many and they are the few."
Damn straight.
All it takes is just that stepping over that line and saying, nope, it's not happening anymore. That's oversimplified. And of course, there's, so many variables and factors, and there's genocide going on in Palestine, and there's, the US still not understanding that funding and fomenting genocide is even acceptable in this world. I mean, there's so much going on, and it's just, I'm trying to find hope, and I think I'm seeing that there is no other choice. It has to end. And maybe that's where hope is.
It's like that. Is this like a dictum of physics or something? It's like when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object. That's obviously also a really reductive read on the political field and like the conditions of struggle right now, but it's feeling pretty simple and accurate. I don't know if we're the unstoppable. As the iceberg, we're probably the immovable object. Especially indigenous people and Palestinians. Palestinians are the iceberg because that is their land. That's their land, and they refuse to move. Like, this is a premise of their anti-colonial struggle and who they are living, in a settler colonial context. They are the immovable object, and the price they're paying for being the immovable object is devastating. And the price that indigenous people pay in general for being the immovable object is devastating. And, we are the tip of the spear. And what did we say in the Red Deal? We're the most, not militant, the arm of the environmental struggle. Indigenous people, at least in North America, are not the most progressive. What was the adjective that we used? Maybe militant? It wasn't militant. But we are the tip of the spear. We're the most we're the vanguard, actually, I would say, of the environmental movement. And not in that weird communist sense. I'm just using the term vanguard in its more general terminology. And when you're the vanguard of anti-colonial struggle, there's a lot of casualties, but it's also fucked up that indigenous people are on the front lines all the time, just all the time.
I mean, and it's full circle too. This land was taken from us to create this colonial project, which is now failing. And it's come, 500 years, not good with math, later, we're still here saying we're ready to take it back now. And, it's with Native people, we were always about the cycles. We were always about the circles. We were never about the lines and the squares. And, all movement is cyclic. It's in our hearts, it's in our souls, it's in our homes, it's in our art. It's who we are. And all motion is cyclic. It circulates to the limits of its possibilities and returns to its starting point. And that's where we are right now, or we're close to it. And I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. But it will get better.
I mean, we are still here. Isn't that the name of like some famous documentary on PBS? But we are still here. And you know what? Palestinians are still here. Palestinians will always be on their land. And it may not feel that way, but I think I said this at the event where that eventually resulted in my getting doxed and attacked. That I said, if there's anything that the indigenous struggle in North America can show Palestine, can teach Palestinians, is that we've played a long game of anti-colonial resistance. We've been doing this for 500 years, and we are still here, and we have not given up, and we are still going strong. Like, your anti-colonial struggle is much younger. It's equally devastating, but it's much younger. But just know that you will always be Palestinian, and that you will always be from that place, the place that you call home, no matter what. And as I think I also said, like, I hope your struggle doesn't last 500 years. I hope it is much shorter, and that you get your land back, and you get the freedom to be who you are in your own homelands once again.
And I hope the whole world delegitimizes Israel, like declare them a non-state and don't give them any power. Don't give them any weapons. Don't give them, Israel has to go.
And there are a lot of nations that have done that, actually, mostly global South nations. Some European nations have made those moves, I think everyone knows that it would really require the United States to make that decision and that move for anything like of material consequence in terms of like the geopolitics around Israel to shift. But I'm just going to say this, and this is important for people to understand, that the only way the U.S. is going to stop aiding and abetting Israeli settler colonialism is if we stop its ability to continue the settler colonial project here. And the people who need to be at the forefront of that movement are Indigenous people, which means Indigenous people need to be at the forefront of the organizing and the analysis on Palestine coming out of the so-called United States. And I know that that's maybe like a controversial thing to say, but I'm hoping that the course of our discussion today has provided some basis and some foundation for making that claim. And so as the struggle to free Palestine moves forward, I would really implore those who really care deeply and who have been doing such important heroic work in the context of the US in all ways, shapes, and forms, to either take a step back and to reassess your approach if it doesn't center US settler colonialism here. Because you can't really have one without the other. You can't have a free Palestine without a free Turtle Island. And this is something, we've been talking about for a very long time. This is something that I think a lot of people understand. I have found that Palestinian feminists understand that better than maybe other folks in the diaspora. And I certainly think that there is a consistent and important critique to be made of the American left, especially the US settler left, uh, and especially like the leftists who've been taking up a lot of space in the work on Palestine over the last 9 months. That you all, need to recenter strong, not just analysis, but mobilization against U.S. settler colonialism here. And then that necessarily requires a recentering on Indigenous liberation in Turtle Island. That will be probably that will be a necessary condition of a free Palestine, because we'll be able to dismantle the U.S. imperialism from within because of that. But it is also morally the correct thing to do, given the fact that you are also operating on stolen land, and that you are also here because of the hospitality of Indigenous people who also continue to face really severe violence at the hands of the settler state. And that the settler state doesn't care that you're not Indigenous, because they'll turn you into Geronimo and they'll come after your ass anyway. Nothing is going to save you from distancing yourself from indigeneity in this moment. And so I've been waiting months to say that in public, because the timing wasn't quite right. There's so much suffering, so much Palestinian suffering. But we are, after all, in the so-called United States, facing on a ship to nowhere. I will say we're approaching like an hour and 15 minutes. Hey, we talked for an hour and 15 minutes anyway. The encampments, the student encampments at multiple universities across the world, but that started in Turtle Island, many of those students and lots of the messaging, they had land back. Like a lot of them had spray painted land back, or a lot of them had political education. I saw the Red Deal. Was a photo of the Red Deal at one of the encampments. So there are a lot of people, I think especially young people, who have a strong understanding of like how settler colonialism here and dismantling settler colonialism here is a precondition to dismantling Israeli settler colonialism. And so they understand those connections. And I will say that the encampments also caught me by surprise. I was taken aback by, I don't know, how badass these students around the world were, and putting everything on the line to advance the struggle for decolonization. And that happened. There's still some encampments that are up, to my understanding. The one at the University of Toronto was led by Indigenous people. There were many Indigenous people involved in the first building occupation encampment at Cal Poly Humboldt. And so all I can say is like mad props and total respect to the students who did that. It was low. It was a low moment as Israel started to bomb and to enter Rafah back in May, which felt like, the end game of the ethnic cleansing of Gaza. And right as that happened, you gave the world, you reminded us to like rev up our engines and to keep going in this like righteous struggle for a free Palestine and for decolonization and liberation. As a professor, it was, just like hella proud of students for going hard. I know that was framed a lot as an anti-war thing, and people were starting to make comparisons to like the student occupations of like the 60s and the 70s during the Vietnam War. But I actually saw it as like a moment for like profound hope for decolonization, first and foremost, personally, as an Indigenous person.
And also, I mean, that gave me hope that I heard a lot of them talking about how can we sit by and watch this happen. Like, well, people have done it for generations. And finally, we might have hit a generation that refused to do that. And I mean, let's not forget this has been happening since 1947. So it's time for it to end.
That's it. It's decolonization or extinction. Yep. It will end because it must end. And the ship has sailed. Like, we are in it. And the only way to get out of it is to end it. That's where we are. And that's why this feels that's why shit's hard. That's why shit is hard. Like, there's only one way to go. And it is really what's the word? It's not uncomfortable. It's insane and it's unpredictable. And it is profoundly uncomfortable. But yeah, just being in this momentum and knowing that the only way to get off the ship, is to stop it. It's a lot. It's a lot to confront personally, generationally, spiritually. And that's what I'm glad you said that earlier, Elena. Like, that helped me to kind of crystallize like what I meant earlier about how taking time off from the podcast allowed me to think about how do we re-strategize and reapproach our progress or the work for liberation, not necessarily while staying safe, but like, I just want us to survive, actually. I want us to survive. And I want Indigenous people to survive this. I want us to make it through, I guess. I want everyone. I know that's naive and not realistic, but yeah, I want the least suffering possible. That's what I want.
It's because we've been surrounded by suffering. And yeah, the least amount of suffering.
Is that too hard to ask? Like, I want the least amount of suffering possible to bring an end to the upside down world. Drowning is a good way to go. Not for those struggling for the right things, but for those holding on to the wrong things.
For those of us struggling for the right things, it's since I started this Gandalf metaphor thing, it'll be like fighting the Balrog and falling through all of those worlds. And then we're all going to emerge as not the white. We don't want to be Gandalf the White. We want to be Gandalf's the Reds.
That'd be another really good title. Gandalf the Red. I don't know, which one should we use for a title? Gandalf the Red. Drowning is a good way to go, or Gandalf the Red? They're both so good. Well, I'm proud of us. We recorded for an hour and 20 minutes, and apparently I had a lot to say. I didn't realize I had so much to say, but every time, okay, look, I'm gonna be real. Even though podcasting can be really stressful because I have like 20 other things going on in my life all the fucking time, as do you. And I was like, oh my God, we have to record a podcast and I don't know what to talk about. Pretty much every time we get on RPH, Elena, and we just hit record, you and I somehow, I hope other people feel this way, but I feel like somehow we pull it off and we come to something. And it's like therapy. It's like therapy in a way where I actually feel like a real revolutionary after I record an RPH episode with you. Because I just, you can get real lost in the sauce out here where you're just surrounded by a bunch of fucking liberals who are, support genocide and fascists, or people who are just apathetic. or people who are really struggling, like most people, and they don't have the bandwidth, understandably, to think through these things. But I feel like RPH is often like, for me, I get to think out loud about things with you, and I arrive at a better place. I always arrive at a better place than when I walked into recording with you.
I do too. I always feel better. I always feel like, okay, so that needed to come out, and it needed to be put into some sort of a framework, and now I feel better. It's been like, it's taking the chaos that's in my mind and creating some order. So I hope that's what we did for everybody.
Yeah, I hope that is what we did for everyone. Wow, taking the chaos and turning it into order. That feels like the Gramscian notion of taking like common sense and turning it into good sense, which makes me feel like a pretty decent Marxist right now too. I don't always feel like a decent Marxist. I don't always think about Marxism. I just admitted something. I just outed myself. I'm a total commie, but like I don't. Not everything is Marx all the time, and not everything is socialism all the time for me. But
no, but then given in those moments where you're wondering why everyone is annoying you, and you go back to, oh, it's because I'm a communist and you all are capitalist, liberal, imperialist settlers.
You're like, oh, that's right. Now it makes sense. Well, thanks everyone for joining us for another RPH episode. Sorry we were gone for so long. I'm actually not sure. I can't make any promises about how frequently we will be recording, but hopefully we can get back on a more regular schedule. I did talk to Sina, our lovely producer, about doing an Ask Me Anything or an AMA soon. We were supposed to do one in like April, and then I don't know what happened, but it just never materialized.
Disappeared.
We all just disappeared. We all just got really sick and disappeared.
Like we put on the rings of power, and all of a sudden we were invisible.
Man, that'd be cool.
Yeah.
Man, cool. Or like time travel. Like we could time travel. Unbake the cake. No, anyway, I'm just digressing and now I'm rambling. But yes, we will be doing an Ask Me Anything soon, like a summer edition. And I promise, this is one promise I will make. We will actually do it this time. But yeah, it was lovely
Send
to
questions.
talk with you again. Yeah, send us questions about all the things. Oh, and we forgot to hate on Taylor Sheridan. I just wanted to make sure we didn't leave before we were able to do that. Because we're the most consistent haters. I feel like of Taylor Sheridan. I never hear anyone else critique his dumb work. But Elena told me something that just made my blood boil.
Yeah, it was Jana Schmieding, actually. I think it was a tweet somebody sent me. So Taylor Sheridan apparently has acquired the rights to do a film on Quanah Parker. And so for those of you who don't know who Quanah Parker was, he was one of the last great Comanche chiefs. His mother was Cynthia Parker, who was kidnapped by the Comanches and actually was taken away from the Comanches much later in life, and she hated being back in white civilization, so she went back to the Comanches anyway. It's a great story, and Taylor Sheridan is going to be filming it, and Jana, all mad respect and love, said what gives him the right to think that he can tell this story, that he should be telling this story. And I just want to say, girlfriend, I absolutely agree with you. I think that guy should be banned from ever doing anything around Native people. And you all probably heard Melanie and I doing that podcast. It was a while back on that awful 1881? The one with the white... 1883, the blonde chick who... it so disturbed us that I think we ranted for about an hour and a half on it. Anyway, I'm with you, Jana. I am appalled and I don't know what to do about it. But between Taylor Sheridan and his best friend, Kevin Costner, who has another movie coming out, in which I understand he has Apaches. And that's supposedly in the theaters. It's called, I don't even know what it's called. These things go in my mind and then they go right back out because I would never pay to see this movie. But it's a Western that Kevin Costner is doing, a la Taylor Sheridan. So we might have to do a podcast on that when we don't have to pay for it to watch it.
I think I saw a preview for this. Horizon,
that's Horizon,
an American saga. He directs and stars in a Western drama that spans the Civil War era. Oh dear God. Anyway, yeah, don't go pay money for that. So what? Go away, Kevin Costner. Don't give a shit. And Taylor Sheridan.
And Taylor Sheridan need to be on that next submarine to go find the Titanic. Put him in a tin can.
Let's shove him down the deep. Do us all a favor. Good God. All right, now that we were able to do that, I'm sorry, I just wanted to make sure that we did that before we signed off. All right. Well, thanks again, everyone, for listening. Elena, as always, it's lovely. And like I said, we'll be back. We'll be back when we're back for Red Power Hour. Have a good day, everyone.